I remember the day Bobby told me that he did not love me anymore. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. We stood in our living room in suburban Illinois. I wore a pale blue dress. Bobby wore his usual dark suit. He looked at me with cold eyes. He said that he had met someone else. He said that I had failed him because I could not have children. He said that our marriage was dead. I felt my heart break. I felt the world tilt under my feet. In that moment, I knew that my life would never be the same. My name is Kim. I grew up in a small town near Chicago. I met Bobby at a company picnic when I was 21. He was charming. He was funny. He made me feel safe. We married 2 years later in a little white church with flowers on every bench. We promised forever under a blue sky. We promised to love each other no matter what. But that promise broke the day he walked away from me. After the divorce papers were signed, I packed a single suitcase. I packed my favorite books, my old camera, and a small box of photographs. I left behind the house that had once been our dream. I left behind the life that I thought was mine. I moved to a small town 2 hours away. I rented a tiny apartment above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread soothed me. The kindness of the baker's family comforted me. I got a job at the local library. I shelved books, helped children find their favorite stories, and learned to smile again. In the quiet of my new life, I kept my pain hidden. I did not cry in public. I did not tell anyone my story. I rebuilt myself one small brick at a time. I exercised at dawn. I read every book in the library. I joined a knitting circle. I learned to grow flowers on my balcony. I learned that a single life could still be full. I learned that I could heal. But I carried a secret with me, a promise to myself that I would not let Bobby's betrayal define me. I decided that I would use my pain to help others. I would touch lives in his absence. I would build a small network of people who needed hope, guidance, and care. I did not know then how many I would meet, or how strongly our lives would connect back to his betrayal 17 years later. In the quiet moments at sunset, I would sit on my balcony and look at the horizon. I would imagine a future where I was free from heartbreak. I would imagine a future where I held power over my own destiny. I would imagine faces of people I had helped. I would imagine a night when I would stand before Bobby again, not as the woman he left behind, but as the woman who had risen from her own ashes. That night was still years away, but the journey began here, in the soft glow of a small apartment in Illinois. Over the years, I quietly built connections with 4 very special people. Each of them found me at a time when they needed help most. Each of them carries a part of my strength and a part of my story. Each of them will be with me when I face Bobby again. First, there was Maria. She was a young woman with 2 small children and no home. I met her at the library on a rainy afternoon. She looked tired and afraid. Her oldest son clutched a torn teddy bear. I offered her a cup of hot tea from the library cafe. We talked for hours. I learned that she had escaped an abusive partner. She did not know where to go next. I gave her money I had saved. I helped her find a shelter. I found her a job at the bakery downstairs. Over time, she moved into a small apartment. She sent me photos of her children smiling. She named her daughter after my mother. Maria calls me every holiday. She says that I saved her life. I know that she saved mine too, by reminding me that I could be a source of hope. Next, there was Daniel. He was a war veteran with nightmares that kept him awake every night. He wandered into the library one cold winter evening, looking lost in his own thoughts. I offered him a book of poetry and a warm blanket. He told me about the horrors he had seen. He told me that he felt guilty for surviving when so many others died. I listened. I did not judge. I arranged for him to speak with a counselor. I visited him at his small cottage on the outskirts of town. I read to him until he fell asleep. He began to volunteer at the library. He began to laugh again. He told me that my kindness gave him permission to live. Then there was little Ethan. He arrived with whispered stories of hunger and fear. His mother was gone. His father was in prison. He came for story time every week, sitting shyly in the corner. I noticed that he rarely spoke. I asked him to help me water the plants. He smiled when he saw the green leaves. He chose his favorite book and read it to the children. He found his voice. I spoke to social services and arranged for him to live with a loving foster family. On the day he left, he hugged me so tight that I felt my tears on his hair. He said that he would never forget me. I said that I would never forget him. Finally, there was Laura. She was a colleague at the library who struggled with terminal illness. She greeted every visitor with a brave face, even when she felt pain. One day, she collapsed between the shelves. I drove her to the hospital. I sat by her side for hours. I held her hand when she trembled. She told me that she did not have much time left. She told me that she feared being forgotten. I promised her that I would tell her story. I organized a community tribute. We invited her friends and neighbors. We planted a rose garden in her name. She passed away with a smile, knowing that her life had meaning. I grieved deeply, but I also felt gratitude for knowing her courage. These 4 lives grew from the seeds of my own suffering. Each one taught me that pain can become purpose. Each one reminded me that strength can come from brokenness. Each one prepared me for the night I would stand before Bobby again. I carry their faces in my heart. 17 years after my divorce, they will walk beside me, shining proof that I have risen stronger than I ever believed possible. The night of the gala arrived with bright lights and soft music in a grand hall in downtown Chicago. I wore a long emerald gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. I carried a small clutch with an invitation that Carol had sent me by mistake. I felt my pulse quicken as I walked through the grand entrance. Guests in tuxedos and elegant dresses smiled and laughed. I smelled the scent of roses and champagne. I felt calm and certain. This was the moment I had waited 17 years to claim. I found Bobby on the stage, giving a speech about his success and his beautiful wife, Carol. His hair was gray at the temples. His suit was perfectly tailored. He looked proud and confident. He spoke of dreams fulfilled and the future ahead. I watched him with steady eyes. I felt anger and sorrow, but I also felt power. I stepped forward, and the crowd parted. I walked up the steps to the stage and stood beside him. The music stopped. The applause died away. Bobby's face went pale. I raised my hand and opened my clutch. From inside, I drew 4 framed photographs. I held them high. The first photograph showed Maria and her 2 children, smiling in front of their new home. The second showed Daniel, laughing as he handed a book to a child at the library. The third showed Ethan, reading aloud to a circle of children with confidence in his eyes. The fourth showed the rose garden planted in Laura's honor, bright petals glowing in the sunlight. I spoke with a clear voice that echoed in the silent hall. "These 4 faces are the proof of my journey," I said. "These 4 lives grew from my pain. They are the reason I stand here tonight." I turned to Bobby. "You left me because I could not give you children. You thought that my value ended with my womb. You were wrong. I gave life in other ways. I gave hope. I gave love. I gave purpose. I built a family stronger than you could ever imagine." Bobby's eyes filled with tears. Carol stood behind him, stunned. The guests stared in silence. I lowered the photographs and held Bobby's gaze. "I forgive you," I said softly. but I will never forget. I placed the photographs on a small table beside the stage. I stepped down and walked toward the exit. I felt the weight of 17 years lift from my shoulders. I felt free. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back. Bobby stood alone on the stage, his speech forgotten. The photographs glowed under the lights. His world had changed forever. I smiled, knowing that my story had power. I stepped into the night and felt the cool wind on my face. I knew that I had claimed my destiny. If you enjoyed this story, please drop your comments below. Let me know which moment touched you most. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more tales of strength and redemption.